My name is Namlondo Jacqueline Sandra, and I'll be moderating this episode on our YouTube channel, Women Rights Initiative, and today's our channel. Basically, this program is on the Women's Voice, which is a platform for Women Rights Initiative, and here we discuss various issues that affect our communities that we talk about. We talk about them in regards to gender-based violence and sexual reproductive health. So today in studio, we are going to have our guest who has been here before, and he will briefly introduce himself to us.
Thank
Welcome,
you. Thank
Hassan.
you, Jackie. Thank you, Jackie. My name is Hassan Sekagioro, and it's a pleasure to be here for my second time now. My name is Sekagioro Hassan. I work with Men Engage Uganda. It's a network of civil society organizations working with men and boys for gender equality and women empowerment. And we do believe that for gender equality to happen, true women empowerment must take place, and men must be part of that solution. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome back again, Hassan. Thank you for giving us another opportunity to have you with us again. Uh, so today's topic, we are it's a very huge topic. So we are going to go bits by bits for us to understand it more. We might go into like 3 episodes discussing on the same thing, and the topic is harmful masculinity and violence. But in this episode, we are really going to understand what masculinity really means, since it's a very broad topic to talk about how it manifests and why it manifests the way it is. So, Hassan, my first question that I need our viewers to understand is, what is masculinity? What does it mean?
Mm. Aha. Well, that's like you have said, Jackie, that's a broad term. Okay, as broad as gender itself. If somebody asked you to talk about gender, it's quite broad. So even masculinity is equally broad, and many more studies have shown how wide this study can be. But in the relation to the topic, masculinity and violence, okay, we will look at masculinity. There are many definitions you can find. If you just went and Googled the word masculinity, you'll find quite a number of definitions. But then we need to interest ourselves in a definition that helps us to look at men as gendered species also. We need that definition that helps us to look at men as gendered species. And that definition is the behavior that men show or men have that hurts the men themselves, but also hurts other people. Okay? The behavior of men, and that behavior hurts the men themselves, but also it leads to hurting other people. Now we put masculinity into the context of the program because we are talking about masculinity and violence. Okay? Then we have to ask ourselves, what is that behavior that men have? Because when you look at it as behavior of men that hurts other people, okay, you miss out the point of having the men part of the transformation process of themselves so that they don't hurt other people. So we want to zero down on men's behavior that hurts men, but also hurts other people. Okay? That way, we can get the men also on board and say, there's something you need to change about yourself. There's some transformation that needs to happen about you, the man. And when that transformation happens about you, the man, then other people are going to benefit from the transformation of you, the man. So at Men Engage, we pride ourselves in in transforming patriarchal masculinities. You see? That's what we pride ourselves in. We transform patriarchal masculinities. Patriarchal being, in a sense, that the dominant behavior of men that hurts the men themselves, but also this dominant behavior hurts other people. So that's what we transform about men. And that's where our acronym, our tagline comes, that we are working with men and boys for gender equality. How do you work with the men and boys for gender equality? Because that is where men's behavior is grounded, that leads to inequalities to other people. Then we have gender inequalities. But also, within the concept of masculinity and the study of masculinity, when you look at masculinity as self, okay, masculinity, first person, where we say self, then we have quite a number of types, because there are men who are dominant over fellow men. Besides men being taken as a category that is dominant over women, okay, but also when you go to masculinity in the self context, you find that you'll find men who are weaker than others.
So we've kind of lost Hassan, but he was basically discussing about the self masculinity, where the men are dominant over other men, and this somehow would bring in some kind of inequalities, and in some way it may cause gender, it lead to other kinds of violence and all. This is basically what we would refer to as the toxic or unhealthy masculinity, where you find that some men. Oh, Hassan, welcome back.
Thank you. I just don't know what happened. I just found myself talking to
Probably it's the network issue.
myself.
Yeah, I think it could be the network, but you were still telling us about the self masculinity.
Yes, within the self, you find that you then realize that as much as men are dominant over women and girls, but also when you get into the context of self, when you are looking at masculinity, you'll find that even within that context of men themselves, there are men who are dominant over fellow men. Okay, you find that in the group of men, they are marginalized men over other men. So those are the when you try to take the deep dive into the masculinity work. But then we look at that masculinity now. Let's interest ourselves in the masculinity that affects others, men's behavior that affects others. And when we talk about others, we talk about women, we talk about girls, we talk about children. Okay, so then we focus ourselves there and try to understand the relationship between masculinity and violence. Okay, now all of us know that violence is learned. We learn violence. We all know that. So we put that on a side and say, we learn violence. No one is born violent. Now we come to masculinity and say, okay, masculinity, it's behavior of men that hurts men themselves, okay, but also hurts other people. Then there the masculinity becomes toxic. You use that word toxic, okay? Then it becomes toxic because it is hurting the man himself and other people. So if it is toxic, then we go back and ask ourselves, how do we learn behavior? Because masculinity is behavior of men, okay? Now we have to ask ourselves, how do we learn behavior as human beings? Because looking at masculinity without looking at a man as a gendered subject, we miss the point. Okay? So when we go back and say, how do we learn behavior? If we have this thing called toxic masculinity, okay, fine. But how do we deal with it? Then we go back and say, how do human beings learn behavior? Then we realize that human beings learn behavior by socialization. Okay? If behavior is learned through socialization, then we have to that you see how we are moving into men also being gendered species. We are moving into men also being affected by gender inequalities. We are driving men and making them understand that this is not only a women's problem. Gender is not only a women's problem. Gender is also a man's problem, because men are also gendered human objects. It's not only women who are gendered. Okay. So when we say that, okay, human beings learn behavior through socialization, now that is opening us to a big, broader concept. And that's why, like you said in the beginning, that this is quite a big, big subject that we need to break slowly by slowly by slowly. So now that we have learned that boys also learn behavior through a process of socialization, just like women and girls do. They also learn behavior through that process of socialization. So then we zero down on socialization of boys. How do we socialize boys? How has society set up itself to teach boys how to behave? Now you realize that masculinity is part of the bigger study of gender. You see, now it becomes part of the big subject of gender, that everybody who does gender work needs to interest themselves into and try to understand, okay, how do boys learn behavior? Do boys learn behavior from society? Okay, what are those elements of society that shape behavior? Then we go into social norms. Then we go into cultural norms. Then we go into religious values. All these things are responsible for shaping masculinity. And if masculinity, we are still having the definition of the behavior of men. Okay, now we must understand the behavior. How is this behavior of men shaped to a level that it becomes toxic behavior? You see? So
Yes.
once we understand that background, then we are like, okay, now we know how to deal with masculinity. Whether you are men engaged, whether you are women's rights initiative, whether you are what, all of us then say we need to deal with masculinities. We need to be working with men and boys, because they are a process. These things are taught to them. So as boys are being taught how to behave, okay, that is where the problem starts, because society, it socializes boys differently from how it socializes girls. Okay, so the way boys are socialized and taught how to behave in society itself becomes dangerous to the boys themselves, but also dangerous to the girls and women in the same society. Okay, so
Yeah.
once we understand it from that angle, okay, then all of us are up and saying, okay, I think even if we're a women's rights organization, we can interest ourselves in working with men and boys. Why? Because if we don't work on their behavior, it is affecting women and girls. So as we work on gender issues and women's rights and what, we need to pay interest on the issue of masculinity. Why is men's behavior harmful? You see, the topic is harmful masculinity. So then the question is, why is men's behavior harmful to women and girls? Why? When we ask that big question, then we are like, okay, we need to find the root cause why men's behavior is harmful to women and girls. Then all of us put on our gum boots and carry everything and say, here we go. We are going on this journey to make sure that if we want peace, if we want peace ample. Okay, so all of us put our energy there, and that's why the work that we do at Men Engage is supportive work of what the women's movement has done for many years. Ours is supportive work. It's not competition with women's rights. No, it is supportive work, because we need to learn a lot. What do women go through? How do they suffer? What are the challenges they are facing? So that as we work with men and boys, we understand these things so that we are able to transform the dominant masculinity, okay? The patriarchal masculinity. We're able to transform that as we work with men and boys and make them understand if you behave differently from what you know, nothing goes wrong. Everybody stands to benefit. Okay? So then we say, okay, that is the self. Then we say we need to deconstruct socialization. The way we socialize needs to change. Then all of us agree that, okay, for us to be able to eliminate harmful masculinity, we need to deconstruct socialization. We need to interest ourselves in parenting programs. How do we push gender equal parenting programs? Because it is through parenting that we socialize boys and girls. Okay? Once we push parenting programs that aim for equality between boys and girls, then we have started remodeling behavior of men. We
Right
have
from
started the
childhood.
journey right from childhood. We have started the journey that creates a new identity of what it means to be a man. Okay? If we don't create that new identity of what it means to be a man, harmful masculinity will persist that teaches boys to be violent. Because we just learn violence. All of us who work with violence programs know that people learn violence. And it means people can unlearn the violence. That's what it means. They can unlearn the violence. If you have done programs with perpetrators, they unlearn the violence because they just learned it. Okay? All these other things are excuses. But now that is the root. That is the real root. Deconstruct socialization. Have gender equal parenting programs. Okay? And
So,
when you do
Hassan,
that,
sorry to cut you off.
mm,
I had a question here that you kept on hinting on about uh, this masculinity where a man, like men are dominant over fellow men. And I was looking at it and wondering, how does that one look like?
mm,
That given such
how that how does it look like? It so happens, for example, I'll give an example of the military. Okay? In the military, men are dominant over other men. Look at an example of a police officer who arrests another man who is dominant in that sense. When all the stories of torture across the world are said that there is torture, and laws are put in place, that is one of the example where other men are more dominant over other men. You see? So there's also that context. And yet when you look at it from the gender equality angle, you look at it at masculinity as a factor that is affecting women's rights enjoyment. Okay? And therefore it has to be dealt with. That's correct. But also when we say maybe the subset of masculinity and a masculinity within men, how do you understand masculinity within men themselves alone without putting women? Is there any harm that is caused within men themselves? What are the degrees of masculinity and stuff like that? And that's why we have the different types, the hegemonic, which is the dominant one, the complacent, the marginal. That's why we have those different types, because when you take it deeper on men themselves alone, then you begin to see the different types of masculinity and how they manifest. Okay? So, in terms of violence, then we say, okay, it's men's behavior that leads to violence. And indeed, it is true. All the world wars the world has seen have come out of men's behavior. But also the current war raging on in Ukraine is also about men's behavior. You see, it's the way men decide to behave. The way men choose to show what it means to be a man and being powerful leads to violence. Okay? Part of the violence, men's violence against women stems from one fact, Jackie. Men's violence against women stems from men's beliefs about women. You see, the belief a man has about a woman is the starting point of violence to the woman. You see, all men who have been involved in violence, when I talk to them, because we have conversations with them, it comes down to the belief they have about the woman, them as men. So that is why the actual root cause now, besides mitigating violence, the actual programming for us to uproot violence, to alter the cycle of violence, goes back to socialization. So if men and boys grow up knowing that women are equals, if that's how they grow up, if that's the belief that they have, they will not be violent. Because their belief is that, this girl is equal to me, this woman is equal to me. So their being violent does not arise because they will just see themselves as equals. Okay? Also, we need to interest ourselves in conflict resolution programs. People don't know how to parenting. When a child insists on something, you interpret it as the child is disturbing you. So how do you resolve that conflict with the child? Because what you do is what the child will learn, that this is what you do when somebody is disturbing you. This is what you do. You are teaching how to solve you, the adult. You are teaching how to solve conflicts. So if you teach spanking, beating, pushing, backing, if that's what you teach this 1-year-old, go away. There you just shout and they are learning that when somebody is disturbing you, you either shout at them or you slap them. You slap them on the hand, or it is us, the adults, who are teaching. You see? So that is how we learn violence. We learn violence quite early when we're still young. And it is us, the adults, who teach us the violence, how to be violent. And that is why parenting programs are very, very important. How do we deal with the issue of discipline in parenting? Okay? It becomes very important because that is how we uproot teaching violence. Before even we come up and say harmful masculinity, before even we come up to that realization, then the question is, where did society go wrong? You see? If you want to use the sociological approach, then we ask ourselves, where did we go wrong? Because whenever we see a problem, the sociological approach says that whenever there is a problem in society, it seems something has gone wrong with the order of society. So if harmful masculinity is a problem for us in this society now, the sociological approach will ask you, where did society order go wrong? Where? So you need to find where society order went wrong for us to see that masculinity is a problem. Okay? Then we go back and correct it. But also, if we are already with a problem, then how do we deal with the problem? We need to have conversation for perpetrators so that we try to help them to unlearn the violence they have learned for so many years. We try to help them to understand how to resolve conflict. boys and men are not taught how to resolve conflict peacefully. No. Much of what boys know on resolving conflict is using their power, is using their physical power to deal with conflict. That is the bigger part that they know. We have not concentrated on teaching boys peaceful ways of resolving conflict. You see, boys know that when you show your muscle power, that is what it means to be a man. You are fulfilling what it means to be a man. So they will want to resolve all conflicts in a violent manner because it consolidates what it means to be a man. You see? Now, we have to change all these things. For us to talk about masculinity that is peaceful, that is enjoyable, that people are not afraid of, because that's when we get to that masculinity that we want to see. We want to change the definition men have of what makes them to be men. And once we change that definition, then we have peace. We have the man being non-violent and has peace with everyone. Okay? But then the masculinity behavior, the behavior of men is an issue for us here. Okay? So when our program is talking about harmful masculinity and violence, okay? So now I think I have tried to make the connection.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
When does masculinity become harmful, and when does it lead to violence? Okay?
Yeah.
Masculinity is not a bad thing. Masculinity is not a bad thing. As long as that masculinity is not harmful to the man and other people. Because being a man is not a bad thing. But the behavior of that behavior of trying to show you a man is where the problem is. In the behavior of males to show that they are males, that's where we get masculinity. That's where masculinity now comes from. So it becomes harmful masculinity. Other people use the word toxic. Okay? So
yeah.
then we say, okay.
Hassan, I wanted you had talked of the types of masculinity, and I wanted you to maybe break them down for us so that we understand the different types of masculinity. You kept on saying the complacent, the patriarchy, masculinity, and all, but we need to understand them, what they really mean.
I hope we will stay on course. Now, we have quite a number of types when we talk about masculinity. We have quite a number of. The common one that people know and have used many times is called hegemonic. Then the question is, now what is hegemonic? You are using very tough words. What is hegemonic?
Yes.
Now, hegemonic is that behavior of men, that the behavior of a man, and he has that portion of his behavior that wants to be dominant on everything, everywhere he is. He just wants to be dominant in his space. He just wants to be dominant on everything. Whether he's in the military, whether he's a teacher, whether he's a CEO, whether he's a husband, whether he's a football coach, you see, wherever you'll put him, for him, he wants to dominate. All other people are down. It is his word that works. Okay? If it is not his word, then it is not acceptable. You can't make any decision unless you have consulted him. Okay? So if you don't consult, that decision is not considered as valid. Why? Because for him, he must dominate everything. He must be in every decision that is made. Okay? So There are men who behave like that. And when they behave like that, the question is, what happens? How do we work with those men? You find that those men become harmful to other people. Those men who have that dominant masculinity, the hegemonic masculinity, they become a problem to other people because they are not tolerant of divergent views. They are not tolerant of different ideas. They are not. Okay?
Their
So
word is
that
law.
becomes eh?
Their word is law. Like whatever they decide, you
Exactly,
have to go with that.
exactly, exactly. For them, it is law. So that type of man becomes a problem. You others cannot enjoy their rights because it is what he wants that happens. Okay? So we put that one on the side. And that is when we do masculinity work, that is the one that we go out for. Yeah? Because
Yeah.
when we look at power, that one becomes a huge problem when we start to look at power and how to do power sharing. The hegemonic masculinity becomes a huge problem. Okay? Now, there are also other types, subordinate. You know? And it comes from the word subordinate, to submit and. Eh? There's also that type of there are also those types of men who are like that. And for them, they will never say, this is it. No, they will always wait for other people to make the decision. And then they say, it is not me. The whole committee is the one that made the decision. Even if they are the chairperson or what, they'll say, no, it wasn't me. I'm not the one who made the decision. It is the committee that made the decision. Even when you approach them and say, we would like you to make a quick decision, it says, no, I have to first call the meeting. The meeting has to first sit. You have to first wait. Eh? So those ones are also there. Those ones are also there. And for them, the problem they have is that they will pretend that it's not them who is the problem. It's others who are the problem. When actually they are also a problem. But they try to hide. They try to hide under others. And they will never make a decision. They'll never make a decision. So you find that it becomes a problem for them to accept power sharing. It becomes a problem. And yet we want 50-50. Okay? So they will always refer you to other people. They have to wait for other people for them to be able to make a decision. Then you come to those guys who are complacent. Okay?
Yes.
When research was done about reproductive health and men, there's also another one that was that came up, Jackie, called paracetamol men, a type of masculinity that was referred to as paracetamol. But before I go to that one, paracetamol, yes, paracetamol masculinity. Now, the complacent ones, for them, they behave like they're not worried. They're not. They're already satisfied. They have that self-satisfaction. Eh? Even when they need to do something to make sure that other people are also at the same level and are achieving the same, for them, they are satisfied. They don't think that other people, their rights are being violated. They don't think so. Because for them, where they are, things are okay. So they don't care. For you, if you are crying reason to fight, they don't see reason to change things. So why are you changing them? What is wrong? And you have heard that when people say, but why do you have to change? These women here want to change, They are satisfied. They're enjoying the privileges from the patriarchy, and they're satisfied, so they don't care. Eh? You may think that they are supportive of your agenda, but when actually they are not. They want the status to remain the same because for them they are benefiting, so nothing should change. These people will not believe that women's rights are violated. They will not believe. They'll just say, no, but you have heard arguments of people saying, but no, so many women have been educated by affirmative action and it should go away. And you see, today women don't need a different treatment because so many women are rich. You have heard all those arguments. Eh?
Yeah.
People, they're satisfied. Nothing should change. There's no cause for alarm. Okay? Why do we even have to talk about women's rights? So this type of masculinity is harmful in the fact that it doesn't recognize that other people have problems. You ought then to understand that
We've kind of lost Hassan again. Uh, what I was curious about was understanding more paracetamol masculinity, but we've kind of lost him again, and we shall see how we can answer that when his network stabilizes. But basically, this show was supposed to talk about masculinity and violence, but then we needed to understand more what masculinity is before we get into the violence part of it. And the way I see it's like as if we are almost coming to the end of the show, and basically he discussed, almost hinted on everything that we had in mind, what masculinity, how it manifests, whereby he was discussing how it stems from our societies, the way we are groomed, the way we are raised by our fellow, about the parentage part, like it comes from the families. So the risk factor that would lead to this harmful violence, there is this exposure to violence, most especially in homes or in relationships, and in the media, in the communities, where these children keep on seeing violence happening, and they pick up things from there, and they continue with them as they grow up. It also may manifest from the poor family functioning. Let's say a family that keeps on fighting all the time. Hello, Hassan, welcome back. Hassan, Hassan, can you hear me, Hassan?
yes, thank you very much. I've been backstage for some time. I don't know why.
I think it's your
Hello.
network. I can hear you.
Hello.
Hello? I can hear
Yes,
you
I can
clearly.
hear you. I've been backstage for the longest time you have been talking.
Oh, okay.
I was saying I've been backstage. Yes.
So you were getting into the
Yes,
vaginal type of
the marginal
masculinity.
one. And I also heard you say that you wanted to know more about the paracetamol. We will
Yeah.
get to that one. The marginal one. So I was saying, by the time we got disruptions, I was saying that when we are doing a campaign, okay, for women's rights and women empowerment, and we have to interface with these policy makers and lawmakers who are males, okay, we need then to quickly scan them and say, what type of masculinity do they have? Then we can know, how do we go around this particular policy maker? If it is the president, if it is the MP, if it is the LC5 and they are male, what is their masculinity? How do we work around them to make sure that we get what we want? We get our campaign through and we get support from them. So the marginal masculinity are people who are on the borderline, eh? not very dominant, but to tip over and transform in between. Okay, so they are easy to transform. Their behavior is easy to change when you do some work with them. The one that is really hard is the hegemonic one. Okay, so the paracetamol masculinity, these are men who, when there is a problem, for example, if the man is sick, instead of going to hospital and get treatment, they would prefer to just buy Panadol and relieve the pain. And that's it. So these are people who don't want, it's a type of masculinity of people who don't want to address the root causes. They just prefer to relieve them. Okay. You remember in the 80s when men used to say, women's issues, women's issues. These women are making noise, women are making noise. Okay. Let's just give them that, let's give it to them to silence them. You know, that type of masculinity, that just relieve them, just silence them, but they are not addressing the real causes. Okay. For example, I would say that, women in politics, women want to be in politics, and then we say, let's give them woman MP tickets. When we give them woman MP ticket, we are not achieving the SDG that says 50-50 representation in parliament. But we use the woman MP to say that we gave them something. We have done something. We have brought them on board. But the numbers are not yet there. The 35% numbers are not yet there, even when we have given the what? The woman MP ticket. And we don't seem to do more to achieve the SDG numbers of 35% of parliament. We don't seem to do more. After we have given them the woman MP, we stop there. We don't do more to make sure that we achieve the 35% in parliament. So that's also a type of masculinity. We maneuver around some of these things and really get true gender equality. Okay? How do we push the numbers? Yes, you have given us woman MP ticket, but we are still not hitting the numbers in parliament that are desired by the SDGs. Okay? What more can be done? You see? What more can be done? And the ones who are paracetamol will not take heed to any other measures to try and correct the root cause of why there are few women in politics, why there are few women in public service. They will not want to do more. So that those are the different types of masculinity. These masculinities are not necessarily
We've lost Hassan again, but the way he was describing the marginal masculinity of not having that 50-50% that we of power sharing, whereby women are 50 and the men are 50, like equal representative, which would bring gender inequalities. Um, he in his introduction he had briefly discussed how masculinity manifests, and he clearly stated that it comes from our societies, or how the boys are raised, and it really stems from childhood. So, in why does how masculinity manifests the way it does, and how we deal with it? We were getting to that, but we kind of lost him, and we are really running out of time. So I would want to conclude our show, since this will be a continuous discussion. I think with around 3 episodes. Uh, he's trying to get back. Hello, Hassan.
Hello, Jackie.
Yes, we have like 5 minutes to go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in these
So
5 minutes,
I would like you to maybe discuss on why masculinity manifests and the way it does, and how we deal with it in
yes.
society.
Now, masculinity is manifest in many different ways. Okay, they can manifest in homes. And how do you know that this is how it is manifesting, and what type is this? You have to watch the behavior of boys at home. You'll find some boys want to dominate over all the other people, all the other children. You find that other boys want to cooperate and make friends with all the others. Okay? So you begin to, these masculinities manifest every single day, everywhere. They don't only manifest in leadership. No, even within an office, even at home, even on the street, even when you go to buy things in the shop, they manifest. So masculinity is like power. It's all over us, everywhere, all the time. It exists. Okay? But then we have to look at what is this that we are looking for? We are looking for men's behavior that hurts other people. So every time we see this men's behavior that is hurting other people, but also this behavior is likely to hurt the men themselves, we have to call them out and say, look here, this behavior is not good for you. This behavior is not good for other people. Within this space, you cannot behave like that. Okay? And that is that's what brings in the value of human resource persons in workplaces, so that they are able to check this behavior to make sure that the behavior within this work environment is comfortable and safe for everyone. So we constantly need to be checking out and calling each other out on men's behavior that is likely to hurt other people. And then we hold the men accountable for their own actions, for their own behavior. They must be held accountable for their own behavior. Not to say men are like that. You see, every time we say, but boys will always be boys, we are missing the point of trying to transform masculinities. We can't afford to say, but boys are always boys. Boys are always like that. Even as a mother or as a father, they come to you and then they say, but boys will always be boys. No. We can't keep saying that, because that's how masculinity is manifesting itself. And we need to be sure that we avoid this behavior growing into harmful behavior of men. So we cannot be saying boys will always be boys. Just leave them. That's how boys are. Okay? No, we have to correct. We have to correct that behavior. Also, masculinity will manifest in terms of decision making. There's a lot of masculinity there. Masculinity manifests in about 4 ways. One is who decides what. We will see it manifesting in who decides what. We will also see it in manifesting who sets the agenda. Okay? Who is setting the agenda? In all those places, you will see it manifesting. Who gets what? Okay? Who gets what? We will see it manifesting. And also, who decides? Who decides? In all those spaces, you'll see masculinity manifesting itself. And that's why we constantly have to work with this patriarchal dominance, to make sure that we come to a level that we call power with. How can men start to work with others as equals, and everybody is influencing the other for what is needed? How do we get to that moment that is influential and not dominant and not patriarchal? How do we get to that level? Because it is possible to get there, because men and boys are not born dominant and not born patriarchal. They learn these things. Thank you very much.
So when you talk of homes, I was thinking of this of saying, boys don't have to do this. They are not supposed to do that. Like, let's say in terms of housework for these young boys, whereby you find that the boys do less work compared to the girls, and yet these are your children. Is that what you meant by way of manifesting in homes?
Yes, that is a dangerous trend, because you are the one, the parent is teaching that dangerous trend by saying, no, that's the boys cannot do that. Okay? So these boys will grow up knowing, I don't do that. I can never do it. And everybody who does that is lower than me. Whoever does that type of work, I'm high above them. Me, I don't do that type of work. Now, then we begin to set a dangerous precedent. We begin to set a different belief within boys of what girls are, of what women are. And that's where everything starts. That's where all the violence and battering of women and girls starts from. All the disrespect, all the lack of inaction to address women's issues comes from there. Because men dominate leadership positions. So when you see inaction, unwillingness to address women's rights issues, it comes from there. It comes from the belief these people have of who women are. Yes.
Okay, Hassan, we've come to the end of the show, and maybe we shall continue this conversation on next week on the next episode. Since I said that masculinity is a very wide topic, so we shall pick up from here.
Okay.
Thank you, our dear viewers, for watching the show. You can always catch up on our YouTube channels or Facebook on women rights initiative platforms, and maybe try to continue to engage with us on that conversation. Thank you, Hassan.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's been a pleasure, and always is a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you.